Hello everyone, I'm Rajesh Gupta and we are at the final installment of our lecture on the multimedia approaches, the second part. So that means that we are almost at the end of our course, and so I will be continuing the theme that that I have already started addressing in the last lecture here. So and that is about the role of artists in research, the role of artists in collaborations, and then also addressing what are the roles of art in our changing society. So what we see here is that there is this one particular project that was undertaken by Desire Machine Collective, and that got this grant from Indian Foundation for the Arts, and this was actually this took place in the island of Majuli in Assam. And what we see here, this is called the Museums Are Closed at Night, that took place in 2016 2017. During this time the project had developed, and we see that there is this museum in Majuli, and of course Majuli being this very culturally significant site not only for northeast but also for the entire Indian subcontinent, and for the Vaishnavite traditions, and then like a particular form of dance, and then also like the mask and various different modes of ornamentation in architecture as well as on textile, and of course that for the rich literary works. So for those reasons what we find that this particular site or this area in Assam, Majuli, it remained significant. And then there is also this museum space where we find that there were certain objects which were there. But the thing is that for the lack of preservance, for the lack of viewership and everything, we find that many of those objects were tucked away, and they almost remained away from the public view, and many people perhaps also were not aware of what kind of objects and things were there in the museum, and how that can also help in understanding the regional specificity or the specificity of the Majuli Island there. So those are some of the things that we find that was brought forward by Desire Machine Collective, and in this display called Museums Are Closed at Night, where some of those selected objects from Majuli were displayed in this place, and the way they were displayed also marked a shift from the way the usual display in the museum space would take place, either on the pedestal or in the glass case. And this display also allowed a different kind of viewers participation from the more formalized displays. In this play also we also see this highly specialized form of weaving that was featured in the Vrindavani Vastra, and this Vrindavani Vastra is that we see it is from 17th and 18th century, and this is an example of that. It's highly specialized form of weaving that we only find in Majuli in Assam, and Assam is known for its weaving, but this is also highly specialized in that, in which we find that the Vrindavani Vastra is a Vaishnavite textile in which we have inscriptions, scriptures written from the Vaishnavite text. At the same time, various figures, the narrative scenes are also depicted onto them. Like for example, here we see that how this particular story of Kalia or this snake was there involved in Krishna's narrative, and then this evil bird that was also there in one of the other narratives which Krishna defeated. So all those things we find that in form of this repetitive patterns they became part of the Vrindavani Vastra. So Vrindavani Vastra is something that was historically been woven in the island of Majuli, but then this tradition was also lost in the subsequent periods. So this is something we find that how this some of these memories which were not preserved in the site, those were also brought to the public view by this project by Desire Machine Collective, for people to think about what is remaining in the museum there, but also like the things which were there in the past, but those things like Vrindavani Vastra which are not preserved at the site of Majuli, but only like the only few surviving pieces of Vrindavani Vastra which are there in some of the leading museums today in the world, like from the British Museum and also like the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So this kind of dialogue, those are created by these artists, and who we can also think that their role not only in terms of like making a set of work which would follow a particular stylistic gesture, but like to engage people with the history of the region, with the history of various kind of artistic and artisanal practice from the region, and how those things can be taken further by the viewers' participation. This is another example, I'd say, that how this idea about the artist participation or the artist collaboration with museums that can yield result which not only benefits the which is not intended to just add more artworks to the galleries, but it is intended for a more immersive experience of the viewers, as well as like the viewers deep engagement with the artworks in a museum setting. So this comes from the Philadelphia Museum of Art in USA, and here what we find that there is this one this is the South Asia gallery that is there, and then like in this gallery we find that there are, of course, there are sculptural works, there are painted works, there are textiles and various different other expressions from South Asia. Now in one of the part, what we find that there is also this particular place, one of this manuscript which is featured there, that is Gulshan-e-Ishq and the Rose Garden of Love, which is that is one of the manuscript that is on display in Philadelphia Museum of Art. And here that was made sometime in the mid 18th century. And so how this particular manuscript had served as a point of departure or as a reference for the contemporary artist to interpret on that. So there we find that another project by Shazia Sikandar, and this particular project which came as it was titled as Disruption as Rupture, and that was in 2016. So this is it's a video animation that we find. It's around 10 minutes long, and then there is audio that is involved, and then there are also components of music. Those were involved in part of the making of this animation. So for this animation, the museum had commissioned Shazia Sikandar. So Shazia Sikandar, as a learned artist who is well acquainted with the language of miniature as well as its history and context, so that was something that was recognized by the museum, and the museum wanted to have this animation as one of the features in the South Asian gallery. And whereas we know that many of the manuscript paintings, even though they are highly expressive, but we do not really see them having this aspect of animation or having this physical movement associated with them. So how to make that more appealing, or how to see like those layered movements which are embedded in those still images. So those attempts had brought forward this kind of collaborations and this kind of commission works. And for there, what we see that Shazia Sikandar made this particular video, and this animated video, and she also said in quotes that I think movement, in this case it will be animation, allows that historical images to emerge in a much more tactile manner. So this is something that Shazia Sikandar says that it is not just a technological intervention that makes it appealing, but there is also something about the way in which we participate with the images. So something that we see that, I mean, when we encounter a manuscript painting or a page of manuscript, then the way we read it, the way we see it, our mode of participation with the image, it will be immediately changed if the same images we see, they are in action, they are in motion, they change, they transform, and they emerge from different perspective and context. So those are some of the things we find, that how this ideas which are associated with the technology of animation, that was understood and that was absorbed, and that was rightly incorporated to elucidate this historical works. So this is how we find that without research, without understanding, deep understanding of works, then this kind of participatory works would not have been possible. And this works, they are collaborative in nature, as I have already mentioned, that there is a component of music that is associated with it. There are also animators who would be working with the artist, and that is how, like, the entire project would be built. So this is something we find, that this aspect of how artist as a researcher, and then how artist they contribute to research, viewership, appreciation, those things that gets enhanced in projects like this. And this is just one project I am talking about from many different other examples. So this should, this stays as the examples of how artworks can be part of this, the artist and the researcher's dialogue, and how artworks can also be part of historical inquiry. It's not just always the historical archive which contribute to making the artwork, but it can also go the other way around, that how the artwork, they contribute to our perception of the historical archives. So it's a back and forth, and in that way we can also consider that how the artworks they empower the position of the artworks, and it's not just about, as I have already mentioned, that it's not the historical text which is hierarchically placed on the top of the artworks, but it can also be, like, I mean, how the artworks, they are in the in conversation with the historical text. Also they possess the like the quality or the capability of sort of reshaping the historical text in many ways. So those things are brought forward by these projects. And to conclude, I'll mention another project, and this is why this is called the Museum of Sikh Heritage in Anandpur Sahib, Virasat-e Khalsa. And this is a project which was conceived in 1999, and then finally it was inaugurated in 2011. So in this project, what we find in this project, we see that there are, of course, that we see that this is a very important site for the history of the Sikh gurus, like, I mean, Sikh Guru Gobind Singh Ji, and this path which is known as Khalsa. So this is, all of them, they had prime importance in the site of Anandpur Sahib, and that was commemorated when the this museum was planned at this particular site. So in this place, what we find, that, I mean, when this museum was constructed, then I mean, of course, there are aspects of the museum we can see in terms of its architecture, and how concrete was used, and then how reflective surfaces here, those were used for reflecting the image of Anandpur Sahib, which is not at a distance from this site of the museum. So all those things were there, but what I'd like to sort of get a little more into is the making of murals inside it, which also takes forward our discussion on the participatory works. Now, the works that we see inside the museum space, there are those interactive murals, and those murals were planned by and executed by graphic artist Arijit Sen. So Arijit Sen is an artist who is known for his work in the field of graphic novels, and of course in terms of design. And so what we find in his practice is that, I mean, how he had been involved in making narratives. So he is also the artist who made perhaps the first graphic novel in India. So that is how we find that from the very early in his career he started interacting with the mode of narrative expressions, and how the narratives hold the capability of engaging viewers, how the narrative can bring historical moments and alive in front of the viewers. So those are some of the things we find that that was enhanced in his within this museum of Sikh heritage. So as we can see in the right corner, and here we have a view of the murals that we have on screen, and then there are those ramps through which like the viewers can walk through this place, and as they walk through they see like various aspect of it's not just about Sikh religion, but it's also about like the culture in Punjab. And then of course there are also some of the very important sites, for example Harmandir Sahib or the Golden Temple in Amritsar. So this is the site that we see. I'm talking about. This is the sacred site for the Sikhs, and so this is what we see here is that. There are histories and culture of the land, and then like the culture of the people. All those things were combined and put together in this long narrative mural. And what we see is that, I mean, it is not just drawn on the wall, but like different kind of projections were made in terms of like, I mean, how certain surfaces are not in the same level with the others. So there are recesses, there are projections, and at the same time different kind of lights which are used here for illuminating particular sites, a particular area of the mural. So this difference is what we find. So it's a kind of like, in one way we can think about its root going back to perhaps some of those the sites like the caves of Ajanta, where we also have like this immersive experience. Once we go inside, then we see this this depiction of the Buddhist world, or like the Buddhist worldview, where the Jataka stories are depicted. And then we also see that how aspects of the contemporary lifestyle and culture, they also come into being in those sites. And we have also discussed that, I mean, how the light inside those cave sites were limited. So that is how like the entire with the light of the lamp, all those images must have been illuminated in front of the viewers. So that kind of the use of the light, keeping those aspects of viewership in mind, we also see like how limited light illuminating particular sections, those are used here as well. I mean, I'm not suggesting that, I mean, they have directly looked at Ajanta, but we can see that certain kind of parallels one can draw from the historical sites in the Indian subcontinent, where the murals in the interior were already there. So with that, what we also see that, I mean, how this mural is not something that is hand drawn, but it is printed. And then at the same time different kind of lights which are used, sometimes projections are used, and of course, like, I mean, then audio is also used in the background. So by that, what we see that how this technological advancement, or like, I mean, this technological tools, they have enhanced the narratives and their capability to engage the viewers into this stories, into this narratives about the land and the religion here. So these are some of the things we find that how Arijit Sen's practice of making graphic novels, making visual narratives, that comes in conversation with the technology of and the incorporation of light with audio, with projection, and all this, how all of them come into being in a work like this. So this work, in one hand we see that it's an artistic exploration of the otherwise the stories, the narratives which are there in the history, which are there in the archives. But then, like, when the artist explores this this themes, then it becomes much more comprehensive to a large group of people. And so that is something that is intended here, and perhaps that is also something that is successfully put forward by a project like this. So it is to say that there are if we consider, like, I mean, where do we situate people like Arijit Sen, where do we situate people like the collective like Desire Machine Collective, can we consider them as artists, or can we consider them someone who can be who only work in the like, I mean, in collaboration with museums or galleries? The answer would certainly be no. And many different projects, like for example making graphic novel, or for the Desire Machine Collective's project where we see this spiral bamboo structure for producing solar energy. So those kind of things, we definitely do not consider them as so-called like the institutional art practices, perhaps in the mid and late 20th century. But now it certainly requires a much more an inclusive view to see what is art. If we consider, like, I mean, art as more than the stylistic objects which bear the stylistic aspect of a particular set of people or an individual. If we think about, like, I mean, artwork that is much more beyond the identity politics, then we see that, I mean, artwork is also about communication, and artwork is also about participation. So those things, we definitely, some of the aspects that we have already seen in the historical artworks in India, or like the historical artisanal works in India, in the Indian subcontinent, something that is perhaps making a comeback with this new interventions. And that is something we certainly need to think about, that this is perhaps that, I mean, that allows us to go beyond the perimeters of the colonial art education, that how we understand art, how we understand design, what are the binaries, what are the boundaries, what are the margins, and then what are the ways in which we can push them forward. So from there, I just mentioned that in 2010, I mean, of course, I mean, we are almost at the stage of concluding it, but I'd also briefly mention that, I mean, from 2010 we see that, I mean, not only people like the graphic artist, not only people like the researchers and many other people, there are also a huge role of the entrepreneurs, who we see that, I mean, they are perhaps not directly working in collaboration with institutes, with galleries, but many of them, we find them to use materials in a much more creative way, in which, like, I mean, that can serve a bigger community. So there are, we also need to be sensible towards that, and in terms of, like, understanding whether we can consider that as artworks or not, and if art is a way of communication, expression, whether that also sort of contributes to that. And of course that this is also something, this kind of questions we also need to ask, since there have been this idea about art which is much more inclusive in from, if we compare that from the modernist art practice or from the colonial art education, then what is the direction we might think about that the art actually, and art in India, the contemporary art in India perhaps take. So those issues can be addressed, those issues need to be discussed further as we move along. So to conclude this entire section, I'd just say that as we have looked into this many many different aspect of contemporary art, and this week's discussion we have loosely divided it into two major sections, in which we have looked into the use of we have looked into the role of the artist, and the idea of new media, like how the technological interventions had made a difference in terms of thinking about the production of artworks. And then we have also looked into this collaboration between the curators, artists, and researchers, and how that also unfolded or made the way for various different kind of collaborations with galleries and spaces which are not perhaps as conventional as the galleries or museums. So these issues we have looked there, and also the rise of the Biennales, the entrepreneurship, and all those issues also come with the emergence of this newly the new forms in contemporary art. So with that, I'd like to conclude the session, and as I have already mentioned that art, we need to think in much more expansive terms, and think about that it's not just thinking in terms of that what is included in art, but also thinking about its margins and what we exclude. So those discussions need to be part of whatever we study, and also keeping the prominence of the materials, the techniques, the socio-cultural political situations which also translate as the content, and then most importantly the human participation in making artworks in India. So thank you everyone.